They say money can't buy life. They are wrong. Money buys time. But even the richest creature on earth couldn't buy a cure for his only son. Caden Vane, the billionaire CEO of Vane Biotech, and the secret king of the vampire underworld, had burned through exactly 1,000 doctors. 1,000 experts from Johns Hopkins to the shadowy back-alley clinics of Berlin. They all failed. His son Lucien was turning to grey dust in a silk-sheeted bed. It was over. The dynasty was dead. Until a waitress with holes in her sneakers and a secret in her veins walked into the room to deliver a sandwich. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the true story of how the world almost ended because of a single drop of blood. The smell of death is distinct. It doesn't smell like rotting meat or old flowers. It smells like copper and ozone. That was the smell permeating the penthouse ICU of the Vane estate. A fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Hudson River in upstate New York, Caden Vane stood by the window, his back to the room. To the human world, Caden was a 35-year-old prodigy, a venture capitalist who rarely gave interviews. In reality, he was 600 years old, the monarch of the North American Coven. He wore a bespoke suit from Savile Row, fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders, but his hands were shaking. Vampires don't shake, but fathers do. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vane," said Dr. Arthur Walter. Walter was the 1,000th doctor. He wasn't just a doctor. He was the head of hematology at the Mayo Clinic, privately contracted for a fee that could buy a small island. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a trembling handkerchief. "We've tried the CRISPR gene editing. We've tried the synthetic plasma transfusion from the Rh null donors. We even tried the ancient alchemy your associates suggested." Walter's voice cracked. "His body is rejecting everything. It's an autoimmune collapse. His cells are eating themselves." Caden turned around. His eyes were a piercing, unnatural blue, currently clouded with a red haze of fury. He looked past the doctor to the bed. Lying there was Lucien. He looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped. His skin, usually a pale marble, was now translucent and grey spiderwebbed with black veins. He was only technically 10 years old, frozen in the body of a child, though he had lived for 50 years. He was breathing in shallow, rattling gasps. "You guaranteed me stability, Walter," Caden said softly. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I promised to try. The boy's physiology is unique. Half-blood. It's medically impossible to get out. Mr. Vane, please, if we just adjust the get out. Before I forget that I am trying to live as a civilized man." Dr. Walter didn't need to be told twice. He packed his bag, his hands fumbling over the latches, and practically ran out of the double oak doors. Caden walked to the bedside. He sat down on the edge of the mattress, careful not to disturb the IV lines running into his son's thin arms. He brushed a lock of black hair away from Lucien's forehead. It was burning hot. Fever in a vampire was unheard of. It meant the end. "I promised your mother," Caden whispered, his voice breaking. "I promised her I would keep you safe." Lucien's eyes fluttered open. They were milky, blind. "Dad," he croaked. "It hurts." "I know, Luke. I know. Am I dying today?" Caden Vane, the predator, who had leveled armies and toppled empires, felt a tear slide down his cheek. "No," he lied. I'm getting another doctor. The best one yet." "You used them all," Lucienne whispered, drifting back into unconsciousness. He was right. There was no one left. The list was empty. "5 miles away, in the grimy suburb of Yonkers, Elfrida Miller was trying to scrape gum off the underside of Table 4. Elfrida order up Table 6 has been waiting 10 minutes for their omelette. Elfrida flinched, banging her head on the table. She scrambled up, brushing her messy brown hair out of her eyes. "Coming, Rick, I'm sorry the toaster jammed again." Elfrida was 23, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. She worked double shifts at the Rusty Spoon, a diner that smelled permanently of old grease and regret. Her uniform was a size too big a hand-me-down from the last waitress who quit, and her sneakers had a hole in the left toe that let in the rain. She grabbed the plate of eggs, forcing a smile onto her face as she walked to Table 6. "Finally," the customer grumbled, a trucker named Big Al who never tipped. "It's cold." "I'm so sorry, Al. I can heat it up. Forget it." He waved a hand, dismissing her like a fly. Elfrida retreated to the counter, leaning against the soda fountain. She pulled a crumpled envelope out of her apron pocket. Final notice was stamped on it in red ink. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, wasn't a vampire, but he was certainly a bloodsucker. She was 3 months behind on rent for her studio apartment. If she didn't pay $1,200 by Friday, she was on the street. She looked at her hands. They were red and chapped from the harsh cleaning chemicals. But there was something else about her hands, something she never told anyone. Whenever she cut herself, the wound closed within minutes. Whenever she had a headache, she could press her fingers to her temples and wish it away. She thought it was just good luck or good genes. She didn't know it was the reason she felt a strange magnetic pull toward the massive gated estate on the hill overlooking the city. "Elfrida delivery run," Rick the manager shouted from the kitchen. "The catering van broke down. You need to take the VIP lunch order up to the Vane estate." Elfrida froze. "The Vane estate, Rick, that's miles away, and they have armed guards." They ordered 50 club sandwiches for their security team and medical staff, and they're paying triple for delivery. "Take my Honda. Just drop it at the gate and get the cash." Triple pay. That was $200. It wouldn't save her apartment, but it would buy her time. "Okay," Elfrida said, untying her apron. "I'll do it." The drive up to the Vane estate was like entering a different country. The broken pavement of Yonkers gave way to smooth, heated asphalt. The trees were manicured. The air even smelled cleaner. Elfrida pulled Rick's beat-up Honda Civic up to the main gate. It was a massive iron structure flanked by security cameras and 2 men in black tactical gear. She rolled down the window. "Delivery from the Rusty Spoon." The guard looked at her, then at the clipboard. "We didn't order delivery. The internal cafeteria handles all food." "My boss said..." Elfrida started, but then her phone buzzed. It was a text from Rick. "Wrong gate. Go to the service entrance on the north wing. Medical staff only." "Sorry, service entrance," she corrected herself. The guard sighed and pressed a button. The gate swung open. Elfrida drove through, winding up the long driveway. The main house was a Gothic mansion, dark and imposing, but she steered toward the north wing, which looked like a modern hospital grafted onto the stone castle. She parked the car and grabbed the thermal bags. The service door was propped open. She walked in, expecting a reception desk. Instead, she found chaos. Nurses were running down the hallway with bags of blood. Monitors were beeping frantically. A man in a white coat was shouting into a phone. "Code Blue! We need the crash cart in the master suite!" No one paid attention to the waitress in the stained uniform, holding 2 bags of sandwiches. Elfleda should have turned around. She should have left the food on a bench and ran. But she felt that pull again. A tug in the center of her chest like a fishhook reeling her in. It was stronger than ever. It was coming from upstairs. Without thinking, she walked toward the elevator. A distracted nurse swiped her badge to get on, and Elfleda slipped in behind her before the doors closed. The nurse got off on the 3rd floor. Elfleda stayed on until the top. The penthouse. When the doors opened, the silence hit her. The chaos of the lower floors was gone, replaced by a suffocating heaviness. She walked down the plush, carpeted hallway. The door at the end was open. Inside, she saw him. The man standing by the bed was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever seen. Caden Vane. She recognized him from magazines, though he looked taller, sharper in person. He was slumped in a chair, his head in his hands. And on the bed, the boy. Elfleda gasped. The sound was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it was like a gunshot. Caden's head snapped up. In a blur of motion too fast for her eyes to track, he was across the room. One hand slammed the door shut behind her, the other pinned her against the wall by her throat. "Who are you?" he snarled, his fangs descending. "An assassin! Did the Southern Coven send you to finish him off?" Elfleda dropped the sandwich bags. "No, I'm just the delivery girl. The sandwiches." Caden tightened his grip. "Liar. No human gets past my guards." "I swear. Please." Elfleda clawed at his hand. Her skin brushed against his wrist. And then it happened. A shockwave, invisible but palpable, rippled through the room. Caden flinched, dropping her. He stared at his wrist where she had touched him. The skin was tingling, warm, alive. "What are you?" he whispered. Before Elfleda could answer, the boy on the bed let out a horrific, gurgling scream. His back arched off the mattress, the machines around him shrieking alarms. "Luke!" Caden forgot the girl and rushed to the bed. "Hold on, Luke!" The boy was seizing. Blood was trickling from his eyes. "Do something!" Caden roared at the empty room at the universe. Elfleda stood up, trembling. Her instincts screamed at her to run. But the pull was dragging her toward the bed. It wasn't curiosity. It was a biological imperative, like a mother hearing a baby cry. She walked forward. "Get back," Caden warned, not looking at her. "He's unstable. He'll kill you." "He's in pain," Elfleda said. Her voice was calm, unrecognizable to herself. She reached past the Vampire King. "Don't touch him." Caden grabbed for her arm, but he was a fraction of a second too slow. Elfleda placed her bare hand on the boy's forehead. The effect was instantaneous. The seizing stopped. The boy's back relaxed onto the mattress. The screeching monitors settled into a steady, rhythmic beep. The black veins on his face receded, turning back to pale blue, then fading entirely. Elfleda felt a rush of exhaustion hit her like a truck. Her knees buckled. Caden caught her before she hit the floor. He looked from the girl in his arms to his son, who was now sleeping peacefully for the first time in 6 months. Caden looked down at the waitress. He saw the name tag on her dirty uniform, Elfleda. "Who are you?" he asked again, but this time there was no anger, only awe. Elfleda blinked, her vision blurring. I think I'm in the wrong room." Then she passed out. Elfleda woke up drowning in clouds. That was the first sensation. She wasn't on her lumpy mattress with the broken spring digging into her hip. She was lying on sheets that felt like woven water. The air smelled of lavender and sterile cleanliness. She bolted upright. This wasn't her apartment. "Easy, Miss Miller. Your blood sugar was critically low." Elfleda spun toward the voice. Sitting in a leather wing-back chair in the corner of the massive room was Caden Vane. He had changed out of his suit into a dark cashmere sweater and charcoal slacks. He looked less like a monster now, and more like a weary god. "Where am I?" Elfleda scrambled backward, pulling the duvet up to her chin. "Where is the boy?" "Lucien is sleeping," Caden said, uncrossing his long legs and standing up. "For the first time in 6 months, he is sleeping without a ventilator. Because of you." He walked toward the bed. Elfleda flinched, remembering the way he had pinned her to the wall. Caden stopped, holding up his hands. "I apologize for my behavior earlier," he said, his voice smooth like velvet over gravel. "I was distressed. You have my word, you are safe here." "I need to go," Elfleda said, swinging her legs off the bed. She looked down. Someone had changed her out of her greasy waitress uniform into a silk pajama set. Her face burned. "Did you? My housekeeping staff attended to you," Caden said, quickly reading her mind. "Your clothes were incinerated. They were a biohazard." "I can't afford new clothes," Elfleda snapped, her fear turning into defensive anger. "And I certainly can't afford to be late for my shift. Rick is going to fire me." Caden let out a short, dry laugh. "Rick." "The manager of the Rusty Spoon I bought the diner 20 minutes ago." Elfleda froze. "What? I bought the building, the land, and the franchise rights. I fired Rick. I closed the establishment. You don't work there anymore." Elfleda stood up, her fists clenching. "You can't just ruin my life because I delivered a sandwich to the wrong room. Who do you think you are?" "I am the man whose son you just saved from the brink of death," Caden said, stepping closer. The intensity in his eyes pinned her to the spot. "Elfleda, listen to me. I have spent $1 billion trying to cure Lucien. I have hired the best minds in the world. They failed. You walked in, touched him, and his cell degradation reversed by 40% in 10 seconds. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. He placed it on the nightstand. $1 million, Caden said. "Stay." Elfleda looked at the check. It was more zeros than she had ever seen. It was her rent for a lifetime. It was freedom. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't know what I did. I'm not a doctor. It was a fluke." "It wasn't a fluke," Caden said darkly. "I had Dr. Walter run your blood work while you were unconscious. You have a mutation. In the medical community they whisper about it. Sanguis aurea, golden blood. But yours is active. It carries a bioelectric charge that stabilizes vampiric DNA." Elfleda backed away. "Vampiric? You're crazy. I'm leaving." "If you leave," Caden said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "Lucien will die. The regression will start again. He has maybe 24 hours without your proximity." Elfleda stopped at the door. She thought of the boy. The pain in his voice when he asked, "Am I dying today?" She turned back. Caden Vane, the billionaire king, looked terrified. "I won't be a prisoner," she said. "You will be a guest, the most honored guest in history. You will have a suite, a staff, anything you desire. I just need you to sit with him. Hold his hand. Read to him. Whatever it takes to keep that energy flowing." Elfleda looked at the check, then at Caden. She thought of her landlord, the cold nights, the hunger. "I have conditions," she said. Caden exhaled a sound of immense relief. "Name them." "1, I want my own car. I'm not being trapped here. 2, you pay off my student loans. 3, You never touch me again without my permission." Caden bowed his head slightly. "Done, done, and done." "Then I'll stay," Elfleda said, "for the boy." A week passed. The transformation of the Vane estate was miraculous, but the transformation of Lucian Vane was impossible. Lucian was no longer a grey husk. He was sitting up, eating solid food, and arguing with his father about video games. Elfleda spent 6 hours a day with him. They didn't do anything medical. She just sat by his bed, reading Harry Potter to him, or playing chess. She learned that Lucian was sharp, funny, and desperately lonely. He had been sick for 50 years, trapped in a child's body, watching the world through screens. "Does my dad scare you?" Lucian asked one afternoon, moving his knight to take her pawn. Elfleda glanced at the door where she knew Caden was listening. He always hovered nearby, pretending to work on his tablet. "A little," Elfleda admitted. "He yells a lot." "He loves hard," Lucian said, his eyes serious. "Vampires don't love like humans, Elfleda. Humans love like a candle. It burns, it flickers, it goes out. Vampires love like a forest fire. It consumes everything." Elfleda felt a shiver run down her spine. That evening the peace was shattered. Elfleda was coming down the grand staircase for dinner. Caden insisted they eat together in the dining room when she heard icy laughter echoing from the foyer. Standing in the entrance hall was a woman who looked like she had walked out of a Vogue cover shoot if Vogue did a Lethal Assassin edition. She had platinum blonde hair, skin like alabaster, and she was wearing a blood-red dress that cost more than Elfleda's entire existence. This was Beatrice Blackwood, the heiress to the European Coven and Caden's unofficial fiancée. "Caden, darling," Beatrice purred, draping her arms around his neck. "I heard the rumors. The boy is recovered. Is it true?" Caden stood stiffly. He removed her arms gently but firmly. "He is recovering, Beatrice. It is not finished." "And this?" Beatrice turned her eyes, landing on Elfleda on the stairs. Her gaze raked over Elfleda's simple department store dress with palpable disgust. "Must be the nurse." "I'm Elfleda," she said, clutching the banister. "Elfleda is the cure," Caden said, stepping between the two women. Beatrice laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "A human?" "Oh, Caden, surely you're joking. You're keeping a pet." "Watch your tone, Beatrice," Caden growled. The lights in the hallway flickered. "I came to see Lucien," Beatrice said, brushing past him. "And to remind you that the Solstice Gala is next week. The Council expects you to attend, and they expect you to announce our union." "The union is on hold," Caden said. Beatrice stopped. She turned slowly. "On hold? Because of a sick child, or because you've found a new toy?" She glared at Elfleda. Beatrice moved. It was a blur faster than thought. Suddenly she was on the stairs, her face inches from Elfleda's. Elfleda could smell her perfume, cold lilies and iron. "You are nothing," Beatrice whispered, her eyes flashing red. "You are a blood bag with legs. Enjoy the luxury while it lasts, darling. When Lucien is well, Caden will drain you dry and toss you in the incinerator." "That's enough," Caden roared. A wave of invisible force slammed into Beatrice, knocking her back down the stairs. She landed gracefully like a cat, but her face was twisted in shock. Caden had used the voice, the command. "Get out of my house," Caden said, his chest heaving. "Elfleda is under my protection. If you threaten her again, I will forget the alliance between our families, and I will tear your head off." Beatrice straightened her dress. She looked at Caden, then at Elfleda. A cold, calculating smile spread across her lips. Very well, Caden, she said softly. But remember, the council is watching. They won't like a human wielding this kind of power over the king. She turned and swept out the door. Elfleda was shaking. Caden walked up the stairs, his face pale. He hesitated, then reached out, hovering his hand near her shoulder without touching. Are you all right? Is it true? Elfleda asked, her voice trembling. What she said, am I just a blood bag to you? Caden looked at her. For the first time, Elfleda saw the mask slip. He looked tired. He looked lonely. No, he said. You are the only thing in this world that matters right now. And I don't just mean for Lucian. The air between them grew thick, charged with that same electricity that happened when she healed the boy. Caden leaned in his blue eyes, searching hers. Elfleda didn't pull away. Caden, she breathed. I have to check on Lucy. He said abruptly, pulling back and turning away. But Elfleda saw his hand clench into a fist, as if it took every ounce of his willpower not to stay. 3 weeks into her stay, Elfleda began to feel the cost. It started as fatigue. She would wake up after 10 hours of sleep, feeling like she had run a marathon. Then came the cold. No matter how high she turned up the thermostat in her suite, her bones felt like ice. She hid it. She used extra concealer under her eyes to hide the dark circles. She drank 5 cups of coffee a day. She didn't want to worry Caden. She didn't want to lose the $1 million. She needed to save her parents' house, pay her debts, secure her future. But the biology of the sanguis aurea was cruel. It didn't generate energy from nothing. It transferred it. Every time she held Lucien's hand, and he got stronger, she gave away a piece of her own life force. It came to a head on a Tuesday. Elfleda was in the library with Lucien. He was laughing at a video on her phone. You look pale, Elfleda, Lucien said, frowning. Like, really pale. I'm just tired, Luke. Didn't sleep well. You're shaking. I'm fine, she said, standing up to get a glass of water. The room tilted. The floor rushed up to meet her. She didn't feel the impact. She only heard Lucien scream, Dad! When she woke up, she was in the medical wing. But it wasn't the luxurious guest room. It was a high-tech lab. She was hooked up to machines that beeped in rhythm with her erratic heart. Caden was there. But he wasn't sitting in a chair. He was pacing the room like a caged tiger, smashing equipment off the counters. Why didn't you tell me? He shouted when he saw her eyes open. Elfleda flinched. I thought I just needed sleep. You are dying, Elfleda. Caden stormed over to the bed. He grabbed her chart and threw it down. Your bone marrow is depleting. Your white blood count is almost 0. The transfer is parasitic. Lucien is feeding on your vitality. But he's getting better, Elfleda whispered. At the cost of your life, I won't trade one corpse for another. Caden raked his hands through his hair. We are stopping the treatment. Today. You are going home. No. Elfleda sat up, ignoring the dizziness. If I leave, he regresses. You said it yourself. He'll die. And if you stay, you die, Caden yelled. Do you think I am that much of a monster that I would sacrifice you? I don't care, Elfleda said, tears welling in her eyes. He's just a boy, Caden. He's 10 years old. I've lived 23 years. It's a fair trade. Caden froze. He stared at her, stunned by her selflessness. Humans were supposed to be selfish, fragile creatures. Yet here was this waitress offering her life for a vampire child she barely knew. He walked to the bed slowly. He sat down and took her hand. His skin was cool, hers was burning. "You are a fool," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, reckless fool." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was an act of worship. "There is another way," Caden said. "A dangerous way." "What is it?" "There is a legend, the Codex of Vitality. It speaks of a ritual that can amplify the healer's power without draining their life source. It requires an anchor, a vampire who bonds their life force to the human. I would feed you my blood, and you would feed Lucian your energy. We would create a circuit." Elfleda's eyes widened. "Drinking vampire blood, doesn't that turn people? Not if it's done correctly. But it binds us. You would feel what I feel. I would feel what you feel. Forever." "Do it," Elfleda said without hesitation. "Elfleda, you don't understand." The doors to the medical bay blew open with a deafening crash. Caden spun around, his fangs extending instantly. Standing in the doorway were 6 figures in heavy tactical armor, holding weapons that glowed with ultraviolet light. In the center stood a man in a bespoke grey suit, holding a silver cane. It was Victor Walter, the brother of the doctor Caden had fired in Part 1. But Victor wasn't a doctor. He was a hunter, a mercenary, who worked for the highest bidder. "Mr. Vane," Victor smiled, adjusting his glasses. "The Council sends their regards. They've decided that a human with the power to cure vampirism is too dangerous to be left in the hands of a rogue king." "Get behind me," Caden snarled to Elfleda. "We don't want a fight, Caden," Victor said, tapping his cane. "We just want the girl. Hand her over, and your son lives. Refuse, and we burn this estate to the ground with everyone inside." Elfleda looked at Caden. She saw the calculation in his eyes. He could escape. He could grab Lucian and run. But he couldn't protect both of them against UV cannons. "Caden," she whispered. "Quiet," Caden commanded. He looked at Victor. "You want the girl?" "Yes." Caden smiled, a terrifying, predatory baring of teeth. "Come and take her." The lights went out. Darkness was Caden Vane's oldest friend, but the ultraviolet flares of the mercenaries turned the penthouse into a blinding strobe light nightmare. "Run to the library!" Caden roared, shoving Elfleda toward the hallway. He didn't wait for her to argue. He threw himself at the tactical team. Caden moved like smoke. He dodged a beam of concentrated UV light that scorched the wall behind him, turning the expensive wallpaper to ash. He grabbed the barrel of the nearest rifle, twisted it like a pretzel, and kicked the mercenary through the double oak doors. But Victor Walter was prepared. Suppressing fire, box him in. 3 more soldiers opened fire. Not bullets, nets. Nets woven with silver filaments and soaked in liquid garlic concentrate. It was medieval, brutal, and effective. Caden roared as the net wrapped around his left arm and chest, the silver sizzling against his skin. He fell to one knee. "Caden!" Elfleda screamed. She hadn't run. She was standing by the heavy mahogany desk, grabbing a heavy bronze statue. "Go!" Caden shouted, his eyes glowing a feral red. Elfleda didn't run. She threw the statue. It sailed through the air and cracked Victor Walter squarely in the jaw. The mercenary leader stumbled back, his glasses flying off. "Stupid girl," Victor spat, wiping blood from his lip. He raised his UV cannon, aiming it directly at her heart. Caden saw the weapon level at Elfleda. The fear that spiked in his chest wasn't for himself. It was a terror he hadn't felt in centuries. He snapped. With a guttural snarl, he ripped the silver net apart with his bare hand, ignoring the burning flesh, and launched himself across the room. He took the blast meant for Elfleda. The UV beam hit Caden in the shoulder. It was like being hit by a freight train made of sunlight. He crashed into the bookshelf, collapsing in a heap of torn pages and splintered wood. "Dad?" Lucien appeared at the doorway of his bedroom, dragging his IV pole, his face pale with terror. "Grab the boy," Victor commanded. Elfleda looked at Caden, bleeding and smoking on the floor. She looked at Lucien, defenseless. She looked at the approaching soldiers. She made a choice. She sprinted not to the door, but to Caden. She slid onto her knees beside him. "The ritual," she gasped, grabbing his face. "Do it, now!" Caden coughed, black blood trickling from his mouth. "Too weak. Can't. You have to." Elfleda grabbed a shard of glass from a broken picture frame on the floor. Without hesitating, she sliced her own palm open. The scent of her blood, metallic, sweet, electric, filled the room instantly. The mercenaries hesitated. Even they could feel the power radiating from it. "Drink," Elfleda commanded, pressing her bleeding hand to Caden's mouth. Caden's eyes locked onto hers. The beast inside him was screaming to feed, but the man was hesitating. "Trust me," she whispered. Caden drank. The effect was not like normal feeding. It was an explosion. A shockwave of golden light erupted from Caden's body, blowing the windows of the penthouse outward in a shower of glass. The mercenaries were knocked off their feet. Caden stood up. His wounds didn't just heal. They vanished. His eyes were no longer blue or red. They were pure molten gold. He felt Elfleda's heartbeat in his own chest. He felt her fear, her courage, her love for the boy. "Kill them!" Victor screamed, scrambling for his weapon. Caden didn't move his feet. He simply raised a hand. The gravity in the room shifted. The mercenaries were lifted into the air, pinned against the ceiling by an invisible force. "You threatened my family," Caden said, his voice echoing like a choir of deep bells. He clenched his fist. The tactical armor of the soldiers crumpled. They fell unconscious, dropping to the floor in a heap. Victor Walter, terrified, scrambled backward toward the elevator. The council will hear of this. You've bonded with a human. It's heresy." "Let them come," Caden said. He turned to Elfleda. She was pale, swaying on her feet. The bond was complete. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was part of him. "We have to go," Caden said, scooping her up in his arms as if she weighed nothing. "Beatrice will send an army next." He grabbed Lucien with his other arm. "Hold on tight." Caden ran toward the broken window 40 stories up, and jumped. They didn't hit the ground. They landed on the roof of the adjacent building, Caden moving with a speed and power that defied physics, amplified by Elfleda's blood. They drove north in a stolen sedan, heading for a safe house in the Adirondack Mountains, a hunting cabin Caden hadn't used since the 1920s. The drive was silent, but the air in the car was loud with unspoken thoughts. Because of the bond, Elfleda could feel Caden's guilt radiating off him like heat, and Caden could feel Elfleda's confusion. "It's in my head," Elfleda whispered, touching her temple. "I can hear you." "I'm sorry," Caden said, gripping the steering wheel. "The bond. It merges our consciousness. It will fade to a background hum eventually. But right now, we are one." "Is he okay?" Lucien asked from the back seat. He looked better than he had in years. The proximity to Elfleda combined with the bond seemed to be supercharging his recovery. "He is perfect," Caden said, looking in the rearview mirror. "You saved him, Elfleda. You saved us both." They arrived at the cabin at dawn. It was a rustic, hidden fortress, surrounded by miles of pine forest. For 2 days they lived in a strange, suspended reality. Caden taught Elfleda how to shield her mind, how to block out his intrusive thoughts. They cooked dinner together. They watched old movies on a dusty TV. It felt like playing house, but with the looming threat of execution hanging over them. But the peace couldn't last. On the 3rd night, Elfleda woke up screaming. Caden was at her bedside in a millisecond. "What is it? Did they find us?" "No." Elfleda gasped, clutching her chest. "It's Lucien. I can feel him. He's gone." Caden sprinted to the guest room. The bed was empty. The window was open. On the pillow was a single black lily. Beatrice's calling card. "She took him." Caden whispered, the gold in his eyes darkening to a void of black rage. "She didn't send an army. She came herself." Elfleda grabbed his arm. Through the bond, she felt his intention. He was going to go on a suicide mission. He was going to burn the world down. "We go together," Elfleda said. "No, it's too dangerous. Beatrice is an ancient. She is stronger than me." "Not anymore," Elfleda said. She stood up, and for the first time her eyes flickered with a faint golden light. "You have my blood, and I have yours. We are stronger than her." Caden looked at her. He realized she was right. The bond went both ways. Elfleda was changing. She was faster, sharper. "The Solstice Gala," Caden said. "She's taken him to the gala. She wants to make a public example of us before the council." "Then let's go to the party," Elfleda said, her voice hard. "I need to borrow a dress." The Solstice Gala was not a party. It was a tribunal dressed in silk and diamonds. The venue was the forgotten ossuary beneath the catacombs of the old St. Patrick's Cathedral in Lower Manhattan. It was a place that didn't appear on any city blueprint. The walls were lined with the bones of the city's first settlers, arranged in intricate, morbid patterns. Tonight, however, the damp stone floor was covered in red velvet, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone, expensive French perfume, and the metallic tang of fear. Beatrice Blackwood stood at the altar. She looked like a nightmare woven from moonlight. She wore a gown of crushed black velvet that seemed to absorb the candlelight, and around her neck hung the Star of the Void, a diamond necklace rumored to be cursed by the Romanovs. But no one was looking at the diamonds. Every pair of predatory eyes in the room was fixed on the small, trembling figure chained to the marble pillar beside her. Lucien. He looked worse than he had in the hospital bed. The stress of the abduction had shattered his fragile recovery. His skin was translucent, the grey veins returning with a vengeance, mapping out his mortality. He was barely conscious, his head lolling against the cold stone. "Brothers and sisters of the night." Beatrice's voice carried through the cavernous hall without a microphone. "We have gathered to witness the end of a weakness that has plagued our kind for too long. Caden Vane was once a king. Now he is a nursemaid to a dying half-breed, and the lover of human cattle." A ripple of disgusted laughter went through the crowd of 200 vampires. These were the elite hedge fund managers, tech moguls, politicians, the invisible hand that steered the world. Beatrice drew a serrated obsidian dagger from the folds of her dress. "The Vane bloodline is corrupted," she declared, raising the blade. "Tonight we purify the throne. Tonight we drink the last of the king's son." She grabbed a handful of Lucien's dark hair, yanking his head back to expose his throat. Lucien whimpered a small, broken sound that echoed in the silence. "Goodbye, little abomination," she whispered. Crack! It wasn't the sound of the heavy oak doors opening. It was the sound of them disintegrating. A massive section of the catacomb entrance wall exploded inward, showering the back row of guests in stone, dust, and splinters. The dust settled, revealing 2 figures standing in the breach. Caden Vane stood in the front. He had shed the bespoke suits of the CEO. He was dressed for war in a tactical Kevlar vest over a black tactical shirt, holding a claymore sword that looked heavy enough to cleave a car engine in 2. His face was a mask of cold, concentrated violence. But it was the woman beside him who made the room gasp. Elfleda. She wasn't hiding behind him. She stood shoulder to shoulder with the Vampire King. She wore a dress stolen from Beatrice's own wardrobe, a shimmering silver gown that had been torn at the hem for mobility. But the clothes didn't matter. What mattered was the light. Her skin was glowing. It was faint, a bioluminescent aura of soft gold that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The sanguis aurea, the golden blood, was fully active, amplified by the bond she shared with Caden. To the vampires in the room, she looked like a walking supernova. She was blinding. "Get away from him," Caden said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice vibrated in the rib cages of every creature in the room. Beatrice laughed, though her hand tightened nervously on the dagger. "You are too late, Caden, and you are outnumbered. 200 to 2. Do you really think you can kill them?" Caden commanded. He didn't speak to Elfleda. He spoke to the bond. The room erupted into chaos. Caden moved faster than the human eye could track. He was a blur of steel and shadow. He launched himself into the crowd, his great sword spinning like a propeller. He wasn't killing them. He was incapacitated them, breaking limbs and shattering knees with surgical precision. He was a whirlwind of destruction, carving a path toward the altar. But the real terror was Elfleda. 3 vampires, the security detail for the council, rushed her. They were fast, lethal, ancient killers. Elfleda didn't move. She didn't raise a fist. She simply pushed. She focused the energy inside her, the burning electric heat that had healed Lucian, and inverted it. Instead of giving life, she projected raw, unadulterated buck energy. A shockwave of golden light blasted from her body. The 3 attackers were thrown backward as if hit by a cannonball. They skidded across the stone floor, their skin smoking where the light had touched them. The UV radiation in her blood was toxic to them. "She's a son. She's..." one of the council members screamed, shielding his eyes. "She's a living son. Keep moving." Caden's voice echoed in her mind. "I will clear the path. You get to the boy." They moved as one organism. Caden protected her from the physical blows, parrying swords and claws, while Elfleda acted as a beacon, blasting back anyone who got too close with waves of searing light. It was a dance of death, beautiful and terrifying. They reached the foot of the dais. Beatrice stood alone now, the dagger pressing into Lucien's skin. A single drop of dark blood trickled down his neck. "Stop!" Beatrice shrieked. "Take one more step and I sever his jugular." Caden froze. The claymore dropped from his hand, clattering loudly on the stone. The momentum of the battle died instantly. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. "Let him go, Beatrice." Caden breathed, his chest heaving. "This is between you and me." "No." Beatrice smiled, her eyes manic. "This is about power, and I want yours." She looked at Elfleda. "The girl. Bring her to me." "Don't do it, Elfleda," Caden said, his voice tight with panic. But Elfleda was already walking up the stairs. Her golden aura dimmed. She looked small, fragile, just a waitress from Yonkers in a ruined dress. "I'm here," Elfleda said, stopping arm's length from Beatrice. "Let the boy go. Take me instead. My blood is what you want, right? It can cure anything. It can make you invincible." Beatrice licked her lips. Greed warred with caution in her ancient eyes. She shoved Lucien aside, letting him slump to the floor, and grabbed Elfleda by the throat. "You are right," Beatrice hissed, pulling Elfleda close. "I will drain you dry, and with your blood I will rule forever." Beatrice opened her mouth, her fangs fully extended, and bit deep into Elfleda's neck. Elfleda didn't scream. She locked eyes with Caden. Now she projected. Caden didn't move to attack. He braced himself. Elfleda didn't try to pull away. Instead, she grabbed the back of Beatrice's head and held her there. She didn't just let Beatrice drink. She pushed. She unlocked the floodgates of her biology. She poured every ounce of her life force, every spark of the sanguis aurea, directly into the vampire's bloodstream. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose. It was like swallowing a star. Beatrice's eyes went wide. She tried to pull back to unlatch her fangs, but she couldn't. The energy was magnetic. It was welding them together. "Too much," Beatrice gurgled. Her skin began to bubble. Veins of blinding gold light appeared on her face, cracking the porcelain perfection. Smoke began to pour from her ears and mouth. The ancient vampire was metabolizing raw solar energy, and her cells were detonating. "Burn!" Elfleda screamed, her own voice breaking as her life drained away. Boom! Beatrice Blackwood didn't die. She was erased. Her body combusted into a cloud of white ash and blinding light. The force of the explosion threw Elfleda backward. She hit the stone floor with a sickening thud and rolled, coming to a stop next to Lucien. "Elfleda!" Caden was there in a heartbeat. The room was silent. The surviving council members were backing away, terrified, fleeing into the shadows. The coup was over. Caden fell to his knees. He ignored his son for the first time in his life and scooped Elfleda into his arms. She was unrecognizable. Her skin was grey, colder than ice. The golden aura was gone. Her chest was still. "No," Caden whispered. He shook her. "Elfleda, wake up. The check cleared. You have a car to buy. Elfleda." Lucien crawled over, clutching his bleeding neck. "Is she? She gave it all," Caden said, his voice sounding like tearing metal. "She emptied the vessel." He placed his hand over her heart. Nothing. No rhythm. No flutter. She was clinically, undeniably dead. "There has to be a way," Lucien sobbed. "Turn her, Dad, turn her." "I can't turn a corpse, Luke. The heart has to be beating to circulate the venom." Caden roared, tears of blood streaming down his face. He looked at the ceiling, screaming at a god he hadn't believed in for 600 years. Then he stopped. He looked at the ash pile where Beatrice had stood. He looked at Lucien, who was healing rapidly, just from being near the residual energy. The bond. It was severed, but the pathway was still there in his mind. A ghost of a connection. "My blood," Caden whispered. "She has my blood in her system from the ritual. It's dormant." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to jumpstart the engine." Caden bit into his own wrist, tearing the vein open. He didn't just drip the blood into her mouth. He pressed his wrist against her open wound on her neck, where Beatrice had bitten her. "Drink," he commanded, using the voice of the king. "I command you to live." He channeled his own power, dark, ancient, vampiric power, and forced it into her. He gave her his strength, his immortality. He poured centuries of existence into her silent body. Minutes passed. The candles in the room burned low. Caden grew weaker, his own skin turning grey as he drained himself to fill her. "Dad, stop! You'll kill yourself," Lucien cried, grabbing his father's shoulder. Caden slumped forward, exhausted, his head resting on Elfleda's chest. "Without her," he wheezed, "I am already dead." Silence stretched. A minute. 2. And then a sound. Thump. It was slow, heavy, like a war drum. Thump. Thump. Elfleda's back arched off the floor. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't brown. They weren't even blue anymore. The sclera was black, and the irises were a swirling molten gold. Vertical pupils narrowed in the candlelight. She gasped a sound of hunger and power. The wound on her neck sizzled and knitted together in seconds. Her grey skin flushed with colour, not the pink of a human, but the alabaster perfection of a predator. She sat up. She looked at her hands. She looked at Caden, who was watching her with a mixture of exhaustion and adoration. Elfleda reached out. Her fingernails had lengthened into sharp, glass-like talons. She gently touched Caden's face. "You look terrible," she said. Her voice was different, harmonic, layered, terrifyingly beautiful. Caden let out a laugh that sounded like a sob. He pulled her into a crushing embrace. "I thought I lost you. I was lost," Elfleda whispered into his neck. "But I heard you calling. You're very loud." She looked over his shoulder at the empty hall, at the pile of ash that used to be Beatrice. She stood up, pulling Caden with her. She felt gravity differently now. She felt the heartbeat of a rat scurrying in the walls 3 rooms away. She felt the blood moving in Lucian's veins. She was hungry. But she looked at Caden, and she knew she wouldn't feed on humans. She was something else. A hybrid. A queen. "Let's go home," Elfleda said. Caden nodded, supporting her weight as she learned to walk on legs that felt too powerful for the earth. "Home sounds good," he said. "But first, I think you're going to need a new dress." Elfleda looked down at the tattered, blood-stained silver gown. She smiled, and the flash of her new razor-sharp fangs caught the light. "Put it on Beatrice's tab," she said. 6 months later. The Vane estate had changed. The gloomy drapes were gone, replaced by UV-filtered glass that let the sunlight in without burning the skin. Lucien was in the garden playing soccer with a private tutor. He looked like a normal, healthy 12-year-old boy. The cure was permanent. Elfleda's sacrifice had rewritten his DNA. Inside the kitchen, Caden was attempting to cook pancakes. He was 600 years old, he had conquered nations, but he could not flip a pancake without breaking it. "You're using too much wrist," Elfleda said, leaning against the counter. She wore jeans and a t-shirt. She looked human mostly, but if you looked close, you saw the stillness. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink often enough, and she moved with a predatory grace that made the household staff nervous. "I am the king of the night," Caden grumbled, scraping burnt batter off the pan. "I do not take culinary advice." "You do if you want me to eat it," Elfleda teased. She walked over, wrapped her arms around his waist, and rested her chin on his shoulder. The bond between them had settled into a comfortable hum. It was no longer a shout. It was a constant, warm presence in the back of their minds. They were never truly alone. "Are we ready?" Caden asked, turning to kiss her. "Ready for what?" "Friday night." Caden grinned. Elfleda smiled. "Let's go." They took the Bugatti, not the sedan. They drove down the winding roads, leaving the pristine estate behind, descending into the grimy, neon-lit streets of Yonkers. They pulled up to the Rusty Spoon. The sign was flickering. The windows were dirty. It was closed to the public, but the lights were on. Caden unlocked the door. They walked in. The smell of old grease and stale coffee hit them. For Caden, it was disgusting. For Elfleda, it smelled like nostalgia. They sat in booth 4. The table still had gum stuck underneath it. Caden pulled a thermal bag out of nowhere. He set out 2 gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches and a bottle of Type O negative synthetic blood vintage 2024 poured into a milkshake glass. "To the sandwich that started it all," Caden said, raising his glass. Elfleda picked up her grilled cheese. She didn't need to eat human food anymore, but she liked the taste. It reminded her of who she was. "To the sandwich," she agreed. They sat there in the silence of the empty diner, the vampire king and the waitress who saved him watching the rain streak the windows, perfectly content in a world they now owned. The Vane estate is quiet now. The guards are gone. They aren't needed. The council doesn't bother the Vane family anymore. You don't mess with the king of the vampires, and you certainly don't mess with his queen, the only known hybrid in existence, a woman who can kill you with a touch or heal you with a kiss. Lucien is finally growing. He looks 12 now. He attends a private school and plays soccer. And Elfleda. She never went back to waiting tables. But every Friday night, she and Caden drive down to Yonkers, to a closed-down diner called the Rusty Spoon. They sit in booth 4, eat grilled cheese sandwiches made by their private chef, and remember the night a sandwich delivery saved the world. That was the story of Elfleda and Caden. From a broke waitress to the vampire queen. It just goes to show you sometimes the person who seems the weakest in the room is actually the most powerful. What would you do if you found out your blood was worth $1 billion? Would you sell it, or would you fight? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a part of our next saga. I have a horror story coming up next week that will keep you awake for days. Thanks for watching, and stay spooky.